afternoon. Secretary General is now on his way back to New York. He left Mogadishu earlier this morning, our time. In a press conference, he said he was happy to be back in Somalia during the Holy Month of Ramadan. The trip to Somalia was part of his long-standing tradition, going back to when he was High Commissioner for Refugees, to do an annual Ramadan solidarity visit to a country and to its people. The Secretary General noted that his last visit to Somalia in 2017 was during a large-scale humanitarian operation to prevent famine, and today the situation is once again alarming. He noted that climate change is causing chaos and a devastating drought that has already resulted in the tragic loss of 43,000 lives last year alone. The Secretary General said that between now and June, 6.5 million Somali men, women, and children are expected to face high levels of acute food insecurity, and risk of famine is looming. He emphasized that urgent humanitarian assistance is needed for some 8.3 million Somalis, and we must act now to prevent a catastrophe. The Secretary General strongly appealed to donors to stand with the Somalis in their time of need, stressing that the international community has a responsibility to support and the interest to support Somalia with the resources needed to defeat al-Shabaab, to build resilience and stabilize areas liberated, and to provide much-needed humanitarian assistance. He added that the 2023 humanitarian response plan, which seeks $2.6 billion is only 15% funded. When famine looms, this is totally unacceptable, he said. As I mentioned, he'll be back in New York late tonight and in the office tomorrow morning. The Deputy Secretary General is in Washington, D.C. today. This morning, she met with the board of the UN Foundation and engaged in a high-level discussion on climate and just energy transitions on the road to COP28. During her trip, the Deputy Secretary General, of course, will be participating in the spring meetings of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. She will do that to spotlight how we can better tackle crises by transforming the global finance architecture. In her meetings today with representatives of government, civil society, and academia, Ms. Mohammed will discuss the benefits of the SDG stimulus, multilateral development bank reforms, and much more. She will be back in New York on Friday. Just staying on travel updates, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, has just arrived in Tokyo, in Japan today. She will be meeting with various government interlocutors, including the Foreign Minister, Hayashi Yoshimasa, to discuss issues of mutual concern, including recent developments in the region and beyond. Back here, the Security Council is meeting to discuss Mali. El Ghassimwane, the head of our peacekeeping mission in Mali, briefed the council members. He described the security situation that remains challenging in several areas of the country, reminding council members that it is crucial for the mission to retain full operational capability to make a meaningful contribution to the improvement of the security and protection environment in Mali. He also said that he called on the Security Council and its members to continue to support the efforts of the International Mediation Group to support the implementation of the peace agreement. Mr. Wane will be available to you at the stakeout after they're done with close consultations, likely around 1 o'clock. Keep your ears open. Moving on to the Central African Republic, our peacekeeping mission there, MINUSCA, is continuing its work to build confidence in the peace process and to respond to the needs of communities through tailored initiatives. Yesterday, the mission launched the rehabilitation of the High Court building in Birao in the Vakaga prefecture. This was done in partnership with local authorities and NGOs. It is a part of a broader effort to rebuild national capacity to fight impunity. Earlier in April, in Bambari, in Waka Prefecture, peacekeepers conducted disarmament and demobilization, targeting about 150 combatants. The mission covered more than 38,000 kilometers while patrolling the country last week and carried out 17 aerial surveillance and reconnaissance missions in areas difficult to access by ground troops. Turning to South Sudan, peacekeeping mission there is working with local authorities to reduce tensions and ensure the safety of humanitarian staff and assets in response to fighting between youth in Akilo village in Pribor. Yesterday, the peacekeepers conducted an assessment mission in Kodok in Upper Nile State following violence between armed groups and in the last quarter of 2022 with recent clashes between youth. The mission confirms that the security situation is now reportedly calm, enabling people to move freely towards neighboring areas in Manyo, Melut, and Baliet counties. A humanitarian update from Chad, or rather a money update from Chad. We launched our humanitarian response plan for the year with our partners and the government today. We are appealing for over $674 million to help about 4.4 million people, including refugees, returnees, and internally displaced human beings. The number of people in need of assistance in Chad has risen by about 800,000 since last year to a total of 6.9 million. This is due to the devastating flooding last year, as well as insecurity, climate change, the continuing economic impact of the COVID pandemic, and the impact of the war in Ukraine. Without emergency assistance, we expect that nearly 1.5 million people will be food insecure during the lean season, which starts in June. Similar number lack adequate access to health care. The response plan this year prioritizes food security, health services, efforts to address the impact of climate change. It is critical that we receive sufficient funding for this year. Last year's humanitarian response plan was only 60% funded, allowing us to reach only 2.2 million people. I've been asked about a video that has been circulating related to Ukraine, and I can tell you that the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine is appalled by particularly gruesome videos posted on social media on Tuesday. One of the videos shows the brutal execution of a man who appears to be a Ukrainian prisoner of war, while the other one shows mutilated bodies, apparently of Ukrainian service persons. Regrettably, this is not an isolated incident. In recent reports, the UN Human Rights Mission documented a number of serious violations of international humanitarian law, including those committed against prisoners of war. This latest violation must be properly investigated and perpetrators must be held to account. Spoke to the Secretary General earlier today, and he said he had also seen the video and was horrified by it and supports the call for the perpetrators to be held to account. Quick note that our colleagues in the UN Framework on Convention on Climate Change in Bonn released a report which says that shifting to a low-carbon economy can unlock new jobs, but it must be done in a way that is socially and economically fair for everyone as possible. I encourage you to look at the report. And a sad announcement from our friends at the International, or tragic rather, at the International Organization of Migration. In the first 3 months of this year, 441 migrants, 441 men, women, and children were documented in the central Mediterranean region of having died at sea. IOM said this is the deadliest first quarter on record since 2017, pointing to delays in state-led rescues that were a factor in at least 6 incidents this year. IOM says that more than 20,000 deaths were recorded on the route since 2014. The agency calls for more dedicated and predictable state-led search and rescue efforts, as well as concerted action to dismantle criminal smuggling networks and prosecute those responsible for profiting from the desperation of migrants and refugees. If I were able to play some music today, I would play Space Oddity by David Bowie, because today is
International Space Day.
International Day of Human Space. You must have been very annoying in school. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, David Bowie Day, yeah, exactly. No, today we mark the International Day of Human Spaceflight. The day celebrates the beginning of the space era for mankind. From the very beginning of the space age, the UN recognized that outer space added a new dimension to humanity's existence and continuously strives to use the unique benefits of outer space for the betterment of all mankind. One example of the above is the space-based services and technologies that are key to understanding climate change. Couple of programming notes. This afternoon from 1 to 2, there will be an interesting talk in the Bookshop with Michael E. Mann, who will discuss his book, The New Climate War. He will be joined by Zinta Zommers, who leads the work related to climate change at OCHA. Tomorrow, our guest will be our old friend Maximo Torero, the chief economist of the Food and Agricultural Organization. He will be joining us virtually to brief on the FAO report on the status of women in agri-food systems. We have reached 90 member states today. Two Asian nations sent checks. Country B, that's the first initial, is 30% smaller than country T, but the population of country B is 169 million, while T has only 6 million citizens.
Bangladesh and
Yes?
Bangladesh and
T.
Taiwan.
Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan. This, you may have killed the quizzes forever. All right, Michelle. Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. Just a couple of questions on the Ukraine grain deal. We're getting closer to Russia's May 18 deadline, and the Kremlin said today that the outlook for its renewal is not so great. Can you give us an update on how the UN is going in terms of, I guess, answering some of the demands put out there by Russia that they require in return for renewing it again?
Yes, what I can, hold on, I need to find my, if you'll excuse me, I need to find my note. What I can tell you is that according to our colleagues at the Joint Coordination Centers, they tell us that routine inspections under the Black Sea Grain Initiatives were conducted today, following intensive discussions within the framework of the JCC, supported obviously by ourselves and by Turkey. Our message is clear, is that we urge all involved to meet their responsibilities to ensure that vessels continue to move smoothly and safely in the interest of global food security. I think, as we've said this and we'll say it again, that the positive humanitarian impact all over the world of the initiative is evident and not limited to exports to specific low-income countries. It's in everyone's interest to keep it going and to work within the agreed-to policy procedures. And as we have more updates, we will keep you informed.
So how is the UN made any progress on the demands by Russia?
The discussions within the framework are continuing. I think it's important that they take place. They take place within the framework of the JCC, which they have.
Sorry, I'm not talking about that.
We are also continuing our efforts to see the full implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding between Russia and the United Nations relating to the export of Russian food and fertilizer. And Ms. Greenspan and her team are continuing actively to engage all the relevant parties on that, because that also needs to be fully implemented.
Yeah. So on that note, are you making any progress? Because we're now, 5 weeks out from Russia's deadline?
You know, we can read the calendar as well as anyone. We're continuing our efforts with as much energy as we always have, and that is quite a bit.
Is there much more that the UN can do? Like, are you reaching
I mean,
the point
there's there's a lot more than others can do, but we are continuing to do what we can and trying to doggedly move the process forward. James, then Edie.
So if I can follow up on that horrific beheading video, you said you spoke to the Secretary General about it. You summarised the call as horrified. Can you tell us exactly what the Secretary General said, if he actually saw this himself? You said he did, so...
He said he was horrified.
Anything more?
Well, I mean, he was literally between two planes. We spoke, and he said he was horrified. I mean, he said, he actually said what I said he said.
That's good.
Yeah. It's usually the case, yeah.
Yeah. What is his reaction that forces working for a permanent member of the UN Security Council were involved in such brutality?
Obviously, I think the video needs to be looked at, needs to be investigated. What we have seen and documented by the UN is brutality in this war, which we want to see an end to.
Yeah. Now, as you know, in this organisation, member states fight very hard for specific jobs. Currently, Russia has the key job in counterterrorism. Do you think that should be reviewed, given Russian forces are using tactics which are not dissimilar to the tactics of ISIL?
It's not that Russia has the key job, has the job in counterterrorism. Is that the job is occupied by someone who is a Russian citizen. Mr. Voronkov is serving as an international civil servant, fully implementing his mandate. As an international civil servant, the Secretary General values personally Mr. Voronkov very much, and has full confidence in him and in his ability to do his job as an international civil servant.
And finally, on this, you said you said it needs some verification and checking this video, but the Secretary General is horrified by this and other acts. Is this something that the Secretary General will raise with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov when he's in New York soon?
They will have broad discussions. Let's see what happens in the meeting. Edie, and then Beitul, and then Deji, and then to some.
Thank you. First, a follow-up on the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Could you tell us what specific issue caused the halt to inspections and shipments yesterday?
I mean, I think you've seen some public statements from the parties on various aspects of the initiative. I can't speak for them.
It didn't give any details whatsoever.
They were, obviously we are in a situation where they were able to conduct the inspections today, which is very important.
And a question on the Yemen briefing by SRSG Grimberg on Monday. Is he going to be?
We checked. We do not believe he will be here because he also has to be in the region.
And is there any update on what he's doing? There seem to be a lot of positive signals.
It's continuing to be in touch with all the relevant parties, and I think to use a 19th century expression, the telegraph lines are humming. Beitul.
Thank you, Steph. I'm just looking at the readout of the USG DiCarlo's trip to China, and I wonder if she also raised the issue of human rights violations in China's Xinjiang region. I don't see it in the readout.
I have nothing to. I have nothing to add to what's in the readout.
So does that mean that she did not
means I
care
have
to raise that issue with the?
It just means I have nothing to add to what's in the readout.
Okay.
Deji.
A couple of separate issues. First on Afghanistan. Today, the spokesperson of Taliban, Mr. Mujahid, published a statement, said that Taliban does not want to create obstacles for the United Nations. Rather, it wants to make it clear that this is an internal issue of Afghanistan which does not create problem for anyone and should be respected by all sides. This decision does not mean that there is a discrimination or creates obstacles for the function of the United Nations. On the contrary, considering the religious and cultural interests, we are committed to all the rights of our people. Just want to know, do you have any reaction to this statement? And what is the situation now for UN institutions now? In Afghanistan?
No real update to share with you. Of course, the decision created a problem for us. So that's our position. As again, you can do the analysis and the compare and contrast, but I have no updates to share with you.
Just now, James asked you if the SG is going to meet with the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Lavrov. He will mention about all those issues. But today, Kremlin said the delegation of Mr. Lavrov is still yet to get the visa here. From the UN side, would this be a problem? Because every single time we feel like the Russian delegation always continue to have the issues of visas.
Well, let me put it this way. We have not, we checked on this particular, on the comments that were made. As far as I know, we have not received any request from the Russian Federation or information officially on that. We fully expect that the host country will meet its obligations. There have been issues in the past, and we have raised them directly with the host country.
One last question for this round. The Russian Duma approved a 200 pages report about the biolab of the United States in Ukraine, and they said they will deliver this report to countries. I'm just wondering, has the Secretariat received any?
No.
No, not yet. Okay.
Ibtisam, then Maggie, and then Dulcie.
Thank you, Steph. I have two questions. First, on Palestine and Israel. The Israelis canceled permissions that they give to Palestinian Christians from Gaza to visit Jerusalem for the holidays, about 700. So first, do you have any comments on that? And then also, when it comes to Palestinian Muslims who want to pray in Al-Aqsa or around that area, the Israelis don't allow men who are under 50 to pray there or to enter, especially in Ramadan. So my question is, first comments, but also, do you believe that such steps go against the status quo when it comes to Jerusalem?
I think on your latter one, it's not a new policy, and it's one we've expressed our concern about to the authorities. I've seen the press reports about the Christians from Gaza being denied entry. I don't have any more details, but it's obviously disappointing.
But do you think that such steps go against the status quo when it comes to Jerusalem and the holy sites?
I think what is important is that the status quo be maintained, including with the around the holy sites, and respect for the authority of Jordan in that respect.
Another question on Tunisia and the attacks against African immigrants. Do you have any comments there?
We have seen a number of extremely worrying attacks, both physical and verbal, against discriminatory against people who come from sub-Saharan Africa in Tunisia. Very disturbing comments from people in leadership positions, which we have stated at the time were completely unacceptable. Margaret, and then Dulcie.
Steph, yesterday when I asked you about compliance with the Afghan women staying home edict, you said they were at risk of arrest or detention. I know that you didn't receive a written notice from the de facto authorities, but did they convey verbally to Ms. Otunbamvaya that if Afghan women went to work, that is what would happen to them? They would be arrested or detained?
I think we can read the situation pretty clearly on the ground. We don't want to put anyone at any risk. There was an edict put out, which is as official as it can be. We don't want to use any of our staff members as test cases, so to speak. So we took the decision that we did.
And do you know if this also extends to Afghan women working at embassies that are operating in Kabul?
I don't know. I don't know. Dulcie.
Oh, thanks. On the Afghan question. So I think you said the other day that the UN has asked all national staff members to stay at home and work from home, men and women, for their safety. I'm not clear why the men would need to stay at home for their safety.
Well, it's also, I think for us, it's an important act of solidarity, right?
But you said the other day it was about safety.
Right, but it's also, the situation is very volatile and fraught, and we want to make sure our staff is safe.
Okay, so it's safety and solidarity?
Well, it's a whole host of issues.
But technically, the men could go out in the field and work.
technically, I assume they could.
Okay, and I have a question about the grain deal. So Russia keeps insisting on the SWIFT system being made available to this agricultural bank. I can't remember the name of it. Would it help the negotiations if Russia agreed to a different bank? Because this seems to be one of the main sticking points.
The issue of the facility, and this is not with the grain deal per se, but with the MOU between Russia and the UN on the facilitation of the grain, of the export of Russian food and fertilizer. Obviously, the fact that a number of Russian financial institutions are not, if not all of them, I'm not sure, are not in the SWIFT system makes things more complicated. And we are in discussions with the people who are responsible for SWIFT and the Europeans and others on that.
So is there any progress on that? I mean, you've been discussing this for what?
I know we've been,
9
but
months.
it's not, I mean, you know, I think there's some issues in which we have power. Very few, but this is not one of them. The Secretary General has no authority over SWIFT. He has no authority over member states that impose unilateral sanctions. He has no authority over insurance companies, shipping companies. He can't tell them what to do. We're trying to herd whole group of people. Some of them are part of trade associations, some are in private sectors, governments, the European Union and others, to make sure that this MOU is implemented. We have not stopped, but we don't have the authority to do the things that those who have the authority need to do to make sure it's implemented.
But why is Russia putting the onus on the UN to do this then,
Well,
if you don't have
we
the
are-
authority?
There is an agreement. Our motivation is to ensure that those countries who need it the most, the poorest countries, developing countries, have access to that food and to that fertilizer, which is not under sanction. Sorry, James and Linda, and then we'll go to the screen. Then I'm having
Okay,
lunch with David Bowie.
So first, the Good Friday Agreement 25 years ago. As you know, there have been events taking place in Ireland and Northern Ireland involving President Biden, among others. What's the Secretary General's reaction to the anniversary first?
The Good Friday Agreement is, I think, rightly celebrated as a tremendous achievement for peace, being celebrated and being studied. It also, I think, serves an example of how you get there. The committed engagement, not only of people on the political side, but of civil society groups, of youth groups, of women groups. There's a very strong exhibit on the ground floor, published by organized by the Irish Mission, which underscores the role of women in this. But as with any peace agreement, one needs to remain committed and remain vigilant to ensure that peace is sustainable.
And as you know, the agreement is not operating fully because the agreement, in part, is about power sharing, and the Northern Ireland Assembly at Stormont is not meeting because of a boycott by the Democratic Unionist Party. What is the Secretary General's message to that party and to the communities in Northern Ireland, given that this thing is not working the way it's supposed to?
I think the message to all those involved is cherish what you have, cherish what you've achieved against all odds when it was signed. But a peace agreement is in a sense is not a piece of paper. It's a living organism that needs to be fed, that needs to be nurtured, and needs to be cherished.
League of Arab States are having a foreign ministers meeting. The key item on the agenda is whether President Assad should be allowed once again to go to an Arab League summit, which will be held in Saudi Arabia in the next month. What is the Secretary General's view on this and what it means for regional peace? I mean, my understanding is there's not consensus, and there needs to be consensus on readmitting him. But does he think it would be beneficial to reconciliation efforts in the region to have President Assad back in the fold, or does he think it was condoning a regime involved in human rights abuses, including war crimes?
I think every regional organization has to take on the responsibility of its own action and its own decisions. What we continue to work towards is a political agreement, and that's the work of Mr. Pedersen, thank you. Please don't tell him I had to pause, of Mr. Pedersen, and we hope that all the countries in the region and all those involved further help us achieve that goal. Linda, and I'll go to Abdelhamid, who's been very patient on screen.
Thank you, Steph. Again, regarding Afghanistan, we know that men are staying home in solidarity with the women's staff. But I'm just wondering, are discussions going on, perhaps at the UN, about this is a rare if unique situation where the UN is obviously told who they can hire. But is there some sense of timing in terms of perhaps an exception might be made in the interest of providing humanitarian aid, you know, the dire situation regarding humanitarian aid? And secondly, is it being discussed, perhaps, the idea of bringing in international women who are exempt?
I think that, you know,
Or at least temporarily.
first of all, I think that involves all sorts of logistical hurdles, but we don't. It would also, I think, be sidelighting our tremendous Afghan female colleagues, and this is why we've have this pause. It's a time for the mission to kind of assess how it can work and what it can deliver, because people need help, and we can't help the people we need to help without the active participation of Afghan women who work in the villages, who work in the clinics, deep in the countryside, work that, frankly, they cannot and should not be replaced. Abdelhamid.
Oh, thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, the Spanish Defense Minister, Margarita Robles, issued a strong statement against a statement by a Moroccan official, saying that Ceuta and Melilla forever Spanish. And at the same time, Spain does not accept England annexation of Gibraltar. So they annexing the two occupied Moroccan cities, but they reject that when it comes to England and Gibraltar. So does the UN have any opinion on this?
I'm sure we have an opinion, because we have an opinion on many things, but I will not speak off the top of my head on the subject of Melilla, Ceuta, and Gibraltar, but let's get some language for you.
Thank you.
Deji.
Okay, so normally my second round question is somehow interesting.
Your first round question was not boring.
Okay, but in a different way. So a couple of days ago, there was a Chinese driver being investigated by forging driver's license from the UN, called the UN Peacekeeping Motor Vehicle Driver's License in China. We know it's not a secret that in many places around the world, UN plates, badges, driver licenses has been forged for different reasons for themselves. But it also could be a damage for the reputation of the United Nations. Can you briefly tell us how to tell these are fake UN licenses?
I mean, we unfortunately play whack-a-mole with all sorts of forged documents that people print up or create, whether UN passports, UN IDs, and we are always open to discussions with national authorities on helping them to show what we know what's real. And everything else is not real. We are also the victims of scams of people. I mean, I get calls regularly of people saying, you know, there's a UN person who's asking for money for travel and so on. It's a sad reality, and you know, if it looks fishy, it usually is. Speaking of fishy, I will let you have the last question, Stefano.
Thank you, Stéphane. Italy government on Tuesday announced a state of emergency on immigration. Any reaction from the UN?
No, I mean, no, not any direct particular reaction. Paulina Kubiak, bonne chance.